The artist Channing Peake cut a colorful path across the central coast of California in the 1950s. He was a man with feet in two worlds, the rarefied realm of fine art and the terra firma of ranching. This self-portrait, boldly conceived and powerfully executed, proclaims Channing Peake's dual identity, artist and cowboy.
The Standing Cowboy was painted in 1950, and his hero was obviously Pablo Picasso. And this cowboy is a wonderful example of Cubism. It has all of the elements of Cubism, but it is a self-portrait of Channing Peake.
Giorgio Rosilli is Channing Peake's grandson. An artist himself, he looks at Peake's work with a knowing eye.
Through Cubism, you could take artistic license and decide that if you wanted to remove something from an object or add something to that object, that's what he did.
From the 1940s through the 1950s, Channing Peake drew images from the world he knew as a rancher. The sensuous anatomy of the Santa Ynez Mountains, farm machinery at work, cowboys roping cattle. He began with an object that interested him, then abstracted it freely, exploring its visual character and expressive potential. For his deconstruction and rearranging of physical objects, his playing with form, Peake owed much to the originators of Cubism, Georges Braque and Pablo Picasso. In fact, he knew Picasso and spent time with him at his studio in the south of France. In this photo, Picasso wears a cowboy hat that was a gift from Peake. In addition to Cubism, Channing Peake was drawn to abstract expressionism, the first international art movement to originate in the United States. The powerful, iconoclastic work of abstract expressionists like Jackson Pollock, Willem de Kooning, and Mark Rothko moved Peake deeply. By painting in the uninhibited, intuitive, and forceful manner favored by the abstract expressionists, and by featuring highly abstracted images of ranch life on California's Central Coast, Peake was reflecting both the time and the place.
These are painted in the 50s, and what was going on the East Coast with the New York School allowed a lot of people to start exploring what was going on inside of something. But Channing was a Western artist. He was somebody that was very much in awe of the physical world. He's a modernist, but a Western painter. Someone that just had a deep, deep connection with the ranching life.
In 1956, Peake's work came to the attention of Elaine Badgley Arnoux, a San Luis Obispo artist who had helped found the San Luis Obispo Art Association a few years earlier. Badgley Arnoux invited Peake to show his work at an Art Association exhibit in March of 1957. The exhibit was an important achievement for the association, and it was also a powerful catalyst for change in the life of Badgley Arnoux.
The work that Channing was doing was rendering the farm machinery into works of art. And so it was new, very new to me, and it grew on me. I began to have a sense of appreciation of the form, and especially seeing around the form, and I was fascinated.
The 1957 exhibit did more than showcase Peake's art. It also included actual farm implements as examples of the source of his imagery. According to historian Daniel Krieger, the exhibit was a critical landmark in the cultural history of San Luis Obispo.
San Luis Obispo was not famous as an art community in the 1950s. It was a sort of cultural backwater. And so the coming together of Elaine Badgley and Channing Peake propelled the organization into a new era. The exhibit in 1957 gave people a sense of the possible. It was the beginning of an educational experience that people did not want to lose. The exhibit is a seminal moment.
Most of the imagery seen in Peake's paintings in the 1957 exhibit was drawn from the Rancho Jabali, the 1,600-acre ranch he operated with his wife, Katie, in the Santa Ynez Valley near Buellton, California. The fabled Jabali was known for quarter horses, roping contests, and frequent visits by Hollywood celebrities, including his friends Gregory Peck, Mel Ferrer, and Audrey Hepburn. The broad expanse of the Rancho Jabali is seen in this 1947 painting, Rancho Jabali in Green. Here, the artist uses lush, cascading color to announce the awakening of the land after winter rains. 8 years later, Peake gave a very different account of the ranch, this time in another season. In Summer, Rancho Jabali, he creates an essentially flat field on which he arranges collage-like elements to create a patchwork effect. Channing Peake also showed an interest in biomorphism, that is, depicting inanimate objects as if they were alive.
And these farm implements become living things. We're not looking at a celebration about the industrial age. There's no reference to that whatsoever. He sees them as living, existing things. They start to have a pulse. It's fascinating.
In this painting, plowing disc harrow, formerly metallic objects have been transformed by the artist into living, breathing organisms. The artist's son, Michael Peake, describes plowing disc harrow as a painting of my father's world, his inner world. In another work, Wind Binder, Channing Peake conveys the dynamic pulse of ranch life by creating an impression of movement on the flat, two-dimensional surface. To Elaine Badgley Arnoux, the highly animated painting also reveals Peake's true personality.
There's this raw emotion that he portrayed in his personality, that raw emotion that he had as a man. This has a fierceness about it, a real tension, and it's a very strong and passionate painting.
Channing Peake loved color and viewed it as a language in its own right. In Side View of a Grain Combine, the physical object is merely the starting point for a meditation on color and design, orchestrated within a Cubist framework.
Cubism, dealing with flat planes, really lends itself to color. If you're good at color, and he was instinctually marvelous with color. Color is clearly a language. It's really, really a form of magic.
For Elaine Badgley Arnoux, the 1957 exhibit and the creative encounter with Channing Peake came at a critical moment in her life.
Because I had very recently lost my second child, a boy child, I had a nothingness about me. I was empty, and I needed something to give me the impetus to start to build again. So it was at this really extraordinary moment that Channing walked up the stairs to look at my new work.
Channing Peake befriended Badgley Arnoux and offered supportive commentary on her work.
Channing Peake in the mid-1950s was a very charming man. At the same time, he was extremely human, very, very real, very comfortable. I never felt that he was talking down to you.
At that time, Badgley Arnoux was ready to move beyond the representational style of painting she had learned as a student at Chouinard Art Institute in Los Angeles. Recognizing her need for change, Peake suggested that she re-examine a familiar object in her own driveway, the family sailboat and trailer.
And Channing said, "Draw it. That's what you should be drawing." And he took out a little sketch pad and he made a couple of lines, circular lines, to show me how I could create volume. In essence, what he did for me was to show me form. And through that form and flattening out the picture plane, the object, flattening it out, but also giving it depth, I was able to reinvent the boat. And this strong statement, I would have to say, was my debut into the world of real abstraction.
Excitedly, Elaine Badgley Arnoux examined the boat and trailer from new perspectives. She deconstructed and reconstructed the objects over and over again, carefully observing the interplay of lines, planes, colors, and textures.
And then because I did it, I was very excited about how I could reinvent it again and again and again.
A similar shift in perspective occurred in Badgley Arnoux's paintings of objects from the natural world. Now she examined plant forms with a fresh eye, often monumentalizing them, as in this painting, Artichoke Red, and a companion work, Artichoke Brown.
Probably the male part of me is the painter of form. The female is the still life, the artichokes, and it's going on to this very day. It's a dichotomy.
While Elaine Badgley Arnoux already had a strong interest in portraiture, her style changed markedly after meeting Peake. Portraits painted in the late 1950s and early 1960s show a heightened intensity achieved through abstraction, simplification, and the bold use of color. In a figurative abstraction entitled Thinking Man, she creates a portrait that is both visually powerful and psychologically revealing. It portrays an architect friend, Wesley Ward.
It was also important for me to get just the essence of him, the feeling of the thinking man, of the eyes that you could penetrate and not penetrate. What I needed was that quietness that Wes represented. I feel that there's a great deal of depth in this painting.
In 1959, she painted a portrait of Channing Peake called Man with Red Gloves. It shows a stoic Peake, his physical being dominated by powerful, gloved hands, an allusion to his prowess as a painter. The artistic exchange between Channing Peake and Elaine Badgley Arnoux was relatively brief. In 1959, Peake left the Rancho Jabali, where he had lived since 1939. He worked briefly in San Francisco before taking up residence in Paris in 1960. Away from the ranch, he moved in new creative directions. In paintings like Baja, the gears, wheels, and other physical artifacts of ranch life were reduced to calligraphic markings.
He gets it to a point in these early paintings of the 1960s where it's just mark making. He has the idea of developing something with an overall field and allowing surface and color to be the commanding force behind this painting. When you get up close, it's eye-dazzling. It's like this cosmic dust storm, just intense color.
In an untitled color field painting that he began in Paris in 1961, Peake allowed the traces of earlier subject matter to disappear altogether, leaving only an energy field in which form and formlessness coexist in creative tension. Although the dialogue between Channing Peake and Elaine Badgley Arnoux lasted only a short time, it was an exceptionally intense and fruitful period for both artists. Moreover, the 1957 exhibit at the San Luis Obispo Art Association was an important milestone in the cultural history of the region. The vital conversations about art that it stirred had highly beneficial effects for the local art community, effects that can still be felt today.
There was a moment here of a different vision, and Channing and Elaine were essential ingredients. And this very successful exhibit catalyzed a number of forces that have gone full speed ahead ever since then. The whole vision that became Mission Plaza really began at that time. And this building would not be here if this event had not happened. And I think we have to look at those pioneers from that time. Channing and Elaine, and give them thanks for what has been achieved.